Hi, this is Jen Rubin, editor-in-chief of The Contrarian. We have back with us our good friend Ezra Levin from Indivisible. Ezra, welcome back.
Hey Jen, great to be here.
You look like you haven't slept in a while, and that's because you are still hammering away. As we record this, although the big, horrible, disgusting, cruel bill has passed the Senate, it has not passed the House. Um, What's your impression of the toll that this bill will take in the 2026 election on these lawmakers who voted for it?
Look, I think you have to look no further back in time than the 2017-2018 period where they tried to pass the repeal of the Affordable Care Act, which led to the largest midterm margins in the history of the Republic in 2018. I think this is politically catastrophic for Republicans. But this isn't just about a political issue. This is about human lives. This is about what our democracy looks like. This is about what our country looks like. We're talking about the largest wealth transfer in modern American history from the poor and the working class to the wealthy. We're talking about funding a mass deportation force, a secret police at the level of the Russian military to rampage through this country, take what they've done in LA, take that show on the road to Seattle, to Austin, to New York City, to Chicago. This is a wild piece of legislation, Jen. This is something that we haven't really seen. And yes, there's a political relevance to this, obviously headed into the midterms, but we're talking about human lives.
It really is. And I think it is the single most dangerous, worst piece of legislation in my lifetime, and perhaps in the last 100 years or so. When your members call Republican House seat members, what do they hear? What are they being told? Do Republicans give an explanation for why they are voting for this monstrous bill? Do they simply ignore the complaints? Do they lie? What do they say?
Look, they're trying to avoid all types of public pushback that they can. Let's ask ourselves this. Why are we talking about this bill right now in early July? What's the rush? Is there some deadline we're facing? Is the government going to run out of money? Are we hitting the debt ceiling right now? Is that why it's going forward? No. That is not why we are expediting this through Congress right now. The reason why Republicans are expediting this through Congress is they know how unpopular it is, Jen. Cutting Medicaid has a 15% approval rating in the deepest red district in the country. We're talking Marjorie Taylor Greene's district, Lauren Boebert's district. Their constituents don't like cutting Medicaid, let alone the Mike Lawlers or the Juan Ciscomanis, the real borderline vulnerable Republicans. Their districts are firmly against just about every aspect of this bill. The reason why they are expediting it through Congress now is they are terrified the public is going to start paying attention. That is why this deadline exists. It is fully artificial. It is politically driven. It has nothing to do with policy. They know that the more people learn about this, including Republicans, the more they oppose it. The more that they learn about it, the more people oppose it, and the less likely it is that they can keep their coalition together to pass it. This is why what we're pushing for right now is not just to kill the bill. A delay is a win right now. A delay is a win. This is the exact same challenge we faced when they tried to repeal the Affordable Care Act 8 years ago. At the same time of the year, our big win in the fight to save the Affordable Care Act was pushing it beyond the July 4th recess. Because you know what happens during July 4th recess? Republicans like to go to July 4th parades and appear in
Yes,
public in front of their constituents. And that is a great opportunity to push harder. So I
absolutely.
I think there's an opportunity right now because of how scared Republicans are. But we've got to keep on pushing. They're not going to tell us where they stand. They're desperately trying to avoid all attention.
Absolutely. Now, the other aspect of this bill is the massive inhumane cuts don't even pay for the tax cuts. The tax cuts are so huge, they swamp the savage cuts. So we are going to blow up the debt. Are Republicans now the party of debt? Are we done hearing about their deficit and balanced budget and all that hooey they bring up when a Democrat is in the White House?
Oh, I think we'll hear it again as soon as there's a Democrat in the White House. Suddenly they'll all remember that they're very concerned about the debt and the deficits. But, they talk the talk, they're not walking the walk. It is clear from this piece of legislation that adding trillions upon trillions of dollars to the debt, it shows where they stand. That's not their top priority. If it were, they would have gotten a Rand Paul vote, for instance, in the Senate. That's why he voted against it. That's why you're seeing some of the right wingers on the in the House side vote against this. They don't want to add to the debt. And look, I disagree with them on their ideology, but they are actually, when they vote against this, standing up against adding to the debt. What the vast majority of the Republican Party stands for in this day and age, though, isn't any concern about deficits or debt. It's about cutting taxes for their donors and cutting services and healthcare for the rest of us. And that's clear. That's not me editorializing. That's what's in this bill. That's what's in this
Right.
bill. So they have told us with their votes what their priority is. It is not debt, reducing the debt, reducing the deficit isn't anywhere on that list.
Absolutely. And the only one who apparently does believe on the debt and deficits in the Senate is Rand Paul, whose
That's right.
ideology you and I completely disagree with, but at least is consistent. He has not broken the hypocrisy meter. Um, we saw something so revealing when Lisa Murkowski was asked about her vote in the Senate. She said, well, it was agonizing, and she doesn't like what's in the bill, and she hopes the House changes it, but she voted for it. How do you explain that? And what kind of thought process is involved in such a like monstrously confused excuse?
Here's what I would say. Whenever a politician says something that doesn't seem to match up with their actions, I tend to tune out what they're saying and focus on what their actions are. The truth of the matter is that Lisa Murkowski voted to cut health insurance for 30 or 40,000 Alaskans. She
Yes.
voted for a bill that's going to balloon the deficit, grow the debt, that's going to send mass secret police deportation forces all across the country, that's going to cut Pell Grants, that's going to cut clean energy subsidies, that's going to vastly remake the national economy in favor of the wealthy. That's what she used her power to vote for, and she was a deciding vote. What she says about why she voted for it, it's kind of irrelevant because at the end of the day, the vote that she had to use she used to support this legislation. If she didn't like the process, if she didn't like the timeline, you know what she could have done, Chin? She could have voted against it. She could have said, I don't follow the president's timeline. This is artificial. I am a United States senator, and if you want my vote, you're going to actually follow the process I want to see. She did not demand that. Now, I suspect, although I don't know, that there was some agreement made between her and Susan Collins and Senate leadership. Susan Collins voted against it. Brave Susan Collins voted against it fecklessly. But the difference between Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski is something very simple. Susan Collins is up for re-election next year, and Lisa Murkowski is not. So if leadership needed to get this bill over the finish line, they wanted to give Susan Collins a talking point in her reelection campaign. She can say, I disagreed with it and I voted against it. And they hope the public just forgets by the time Murkowski is up next. That's my guess.
To be clear, Susan Collins could have killed this bill by voting no on the motion to proceed. That's not a bunch of gobbledygook. Basically, she voted to allow them to pass the bill. And she is just as responsible. She's just more cowardly and more afraid, as you say, of the voters because they're in her face. And by the way, I would say that the guy who is up for reelection in 2026 is Dan Sullivan. And Murkowski famously advocates on behalf of both of them. So if you don't like what she did, Alaskans, you can vote him out. So it can be a very disappointing, infuriating, despondent time for many Americans. Going forward, what are you telling indivisible members? What are you telling your fellow Americans? What do they do now?
This is still a democracy. This is not some authoritarian dictatorship. Donald Trump does not have all the power. The Republicans in Congress do not have all the power. We are going to have elections. We're going to have elections this November in Virginia and New Jersey and elsewhere. We're going to have midterm elections, and those midterm elections need to be a referendum on this agenda. This isn't going to be a vibes-based election. This is going to be a concrete, what did you do for me and my family and my community? And it's very, very clear what Donald Trump, with a Republican trifecta in the Senate and the House, wants to do to you and your family and your community. They're telling us right now. So it is really important that we don't let this pass and then forget about it and move on to the next catastrophe.
Right.
This is a defining feature of the 2026 midterms. This becomes a defining feature of the Republican Party going forward. And we need to make them own this.
Yes.
In 2017, they failed to pass the Affordable Care Act repeal, and then they succeeded in passing one of the largest tax cuts for the rich in American history at the end of 2017. They succeeded in doing that through a reconciliation process, but we didn't just move on. We forced them to own that over the coming months leading up into the election. And like I said, that led to the largest midterm margins in the history of the Republic. It delivered Democrats the House of Representatives, and it allowed us to stop further damage and start exercising some amount of oversight. So, what do we do? What do we do? We use our constitutional rights as Americans to push back, to petition the government, and to notify the rest of our community. Here are the folks who are attacking us. Do not give them another 2 years of power.
And by the way, even if down the road your Republican representative voted for this, as no doubt there will be most people who have a Republican representative, save those few people who voted no consistently, you should remind them they are not going to get reelected. Let's see which of them have the nerve to even stand for election. Tom Tillis knew he couldn't survive a primary, so he's out. Maybe Joni Ernst will retire. Maybe Lisa Murkowski will retire. Maybe Susan Collins will finally hang it up. So stay on these Republicans, remind them over and over and over again what they have done, and that this is, and I have no other word, unforgivable. There's no vote that Lisa Murkowski can ever take. There's no vote that Susan Collins can ever take. And by the way, those two senators both voted to put justices on the Supreme Court who reversed Roe v. Wade. So when you talk about horrendous senators and horrendous votes, those two certainly take the cake. But when people get through this period and they've had their July 4th, what's the next big event that Indivisible has planned and that people can look forward to express their fury with this kind of reverse Robin Hood scheme?
Well, coming up on July 17th is Good Trouble Lives On. This is the 5 year anniversary of John Lewis's passing. So we are teaming up with Transformative Justice Coalition, who is really taking the lead here. And there are going to be nationwide events in every single state of folks showing up in memory of John Lewis's life and his work, which was a life devoted to fighting for justice, fighting for equity, and fighting for American democracy. We need to show up just like we did on No King's Day, just like we did on May Day, just like we did during Hands Off. We need to show up. We need to pull in new community members and build the movement muscle because things aren't moving in the right direction when it comes to Trump. He is steamrolling forward. If we find ourselves in a situation where ICE has the budget of the Russian military and is sending deportation forces all around the country, we need to organize where we are. We need to organize in our communities, both to push back against federal overreach, but also to organize more people into this fight. What we know from the experts in authoritarianism is you don't need 50% of the population mobilized. I think people might think, oh, he's gotten tens of millions of votes. How can we get all the MAGAs over to our side? It's impossible. No, 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 no. The best research says you need 3.5%. This comes from Erica Chenoweth at Harvard, 3.5% of the population consistently engaged and mobilizing successfully pushes back against authoritarian overreach. In the US context, we're talking 11 or 12 million people. We're more than halfway there with no kings. So we're continuing to build, but that means all of us getting engaged, all of us participating in these actions. So I hope folks find their local Good Trouble Lives On protest on July 17th, finds community members who are committed, and builds.
Absolutely. And I want to also reiterate something. The mayoral race in New York, which freaked out a whole group of people, including the president, who fascistically now wants to
Yeah.
delegitimize the mayor's or the mayoral nominee's citizenship and deport
Yeah.
him. That's what we're talking about, that level of fascism. That they brought new people in. They brought in a huge number of first-time voters.
Yeah.
So we shouldn't accept that the electorate is what it was in 2020 or 2022 or 2024. If we change the electorate, we can change the vote. So maybe folks should bring someone who isn't political, who's never voted, who thinks it's all a canard to one of those events and show, first of all, the fun people are on this side. It's really fun. It's really inspiring. It's a good time. And secondly, that if they don't like things, they can change things. And that's what this is all about.
I think
They don't have a choice. You have to do something. You have to fight back.
I think this is actually as scary as it is in this moment with Trump and the Republicans just overreaching in the way that they are. There is a big opportunity right now for change. I think the public is
Right.
hungry for something different. They don't trust the Democratic establishment leadership that responded to Trump the way that they did, but they don't like the fascist agenda that Trump and his allies are pushing forward either. And so if you have somebody like Imam Dami come in and say, "Look, I've got different ideas. I'm not a tool of the system. I'm willing to run against it, and I have the courage of my convictions," it's going to resonate. I hope a lot of people see that around the country and think, "Oh, wow, actually, maybe there is a promise to politics I didn't realize existed out there. Maybe I can be inspired by this whole political system of ours. Maybe I just haven't had the right candidates." I hope they start looking around for who those candidates are.
Absolutely. And maybe they can be a candidate too.
Indeed.
It starts at the local level. And
Yeah.
listen, we had a whole phenomenal class of first-time politicians in 2018, many women.
Yeah.
They won, they served, they're now on to higher office. Ezra, I cannot thank you enough for millions of Americans, quite literally. Indivisible is a lifeline. It's a way to maintain sanity, maintain the fight. So thank you, to the millions of people at Indivisible who organize, who keep up the fight, who make good trouble. So we will look forward to getting folks out on the 17th and for every step of the way, because we don't have any choice but to fight, folks.
That's right. See everybody out there on the 17th.
Thanks so much. See you next time.